Makoto Shinkai, who I'm infamously a massive fan of, just put out a new movie called Suzume, which I saw opening night at the theater. Okay, so in the past, I haven't had a reputation of enjoying Shinkai's filmography. My relationship with Your Name has always been complicated, but for a while I outright disliked the movie, summarizing all my complaints in a video that is so bad, I at one point had it privated out of embarrassment. When I first watched Weathering with You, also at the cinema, I thought it was just okay, which in retrospect is probably the worst take I've ever had on any piece of media ever, except that time I gave Bokyubin a 10. But throughout March of this year, me and Neon Manta held an event called Shinkai Month on the Castaway Anime podcast, where we watched every single Shinkai movie in preparation for Suzume's release. And while the first couple podcasts in the series only made me feel vindicated in my negative feelings towards Shinkai's work, by the time I had finished rewatching Weathering with You, I could truthfully call myself a bona fide Shinkai fan. We're in the weirdest timeline, I know. So where does Suzume stand in the face of all this? Do I think it's some hood classic Shinkino, or another unfortunate case of Midkoto shitkai? IMO, Suzume is the second best movie Shinkai has ever made, and I'd overall give it an 8 out of 10. Suzume herself is one endearing-ass protagonist, and I kinda like how she thirsts after Souta, aka Shun from Lost Voices AI upscaled to 4K, from pretty much the second she lays eyes on him. I dunno, I thought it was funny. I'm disappointed she didn't go full Nina from Code Geass on Chair Souta, but as a consolation, she does step and sit on him, so that's pretty cool. Daijin is a wonderful villain. I absolutely love him. Despite being an adorable cat and a complete simp for Suzume, he can be surprisingly menacing at times, and the way he's animated is always a joy to watch. The plot is a whole lot of fun, even if it does feel a bit overly long, and I loved seeing Suzume go on this wacky adventure with Souta to catch Daijin. The movie feels energetic and full of life, so it's never boring even with the questionable but still solid pacing. And overall, I heartily recommend it. If you came to this video just to know whether or not Suzume is worth watching, you can click off now. From here on out, I will be posting major spoilers in general chat, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, shoo, go away. As for the rest of you, Suzume has some issues. I know it's kinda weird to say I'm a Shinkai fan and that this is his second best movie, only to spend the remainder of this video criticizing him, but I promised myself I'd keep this video short, and I think the most interesting path of discussion in regards to this movie is its shortcomings. Believe it or not, my problem with this movie isn't that it feels too similar to Your Name and Weathering with You. In fact, I don't feel that way at all. No, my problem with Suzume is that its major themes are poorly executed. So much so that the film feels kind of pointless, which feels weird to say about a film that is very clearly trying to make a point. Let's start from the beginning. Suzume's main theme is about overcoming grief, or at least I think it's sensible to claim that as the main message of this movie. The film is about a door that leads you to the afterlife, and Suzume's mom died when she was 4, which caused no good, very bad things to happen to Mini Suzume's mental state. The emotional resolution of the film, then, is Suzume giving her child self a pep talk, and telling her that while today may be grim, tomorrow can be great, and that you just need to keep trudging forward through life. All of this, at least on paper, is well and fine. Here's where it falls apart. If the narrative is about Suzume overcoming the trauma of her mother dying, where's the trauma? Suzume, as a protagonist, can be most accurately described as energetic, sociable, and assertive. She has friends at school and makes plenty more acquaintances on her journey, and she very quickly builds rapport with Souta. She can be shy, but generally is not, and her default mood seems to be pretty upbeat. So if she has to overcome trauma, where is it? 'Cause to me, it seems like Suzume has already overcome her trauma long ago. Which, you know, makes sense. Her mom died when she was just 4 years old, after all, and right now she's a high schooler. It makes complete sense for her to have already processed that trauma long ago. Sure, child Suzume is shown grieving, but not teenage Suzume. Okay, but what if Suzume masks her trauma? What if she still feels grief deep down, but covers it up? I'm all for that being a part of her character. I'm literally writing a novel about social masking. But if that's the case, you still need to establish that she's grieving underneath the mask. As is, the movie doesn't make any attempt to establish that Suzume is suffering underneath the surface. The closest the film gets to establishing any sort of lingering trauma is in a scene where Suzume nearly falls off a Ferris wheel because she sees an illusion of her mom in the afterlife. But even then, although it's clear she wants to see her mom again, there's no indication that she's still struggling on a day-to-day basis with her trauma. The film's message is botched to the point that there was a time when I sincerely asked myself, is the movie supposed to be about overcoming grief? It is, and that question is silly, but I think the fact I asked that question speaks volumes. Perhaps about my intelligence, but also the movie. However, if you've read any interviews with Shinkai about Suzume, you probably know that the film is also quite upfrontly about something else. Throughout the film, there are these worms that come out of doors, cause a bunch of earthquakes, and threaten to cause mass destruction and whatnot. Suzume and Souta then have to close and lock all the doors in order to stop the worm apocalypse. Trust me, it makes sense in the film. Suzume's mom died in 311. Now, if you don't know what 311 is, don't worry. I didn't either until I watched this movie. Basically, on the 11th of March 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake devastated East Japan. In an interview, Makoto Shinkai describes how the earthquake made him realize just how fragile the status quo of Japanese life is. All the interviews I read are linked in the description, and I didn't even get close to reading all of them. Search Makoto Shinkai Suzume interview on Google and you could probably spend longer than the movie's runtime reading them all. In short though, the worms are a metaphor for natural disasters, and closing the doors is, twofold, a metaphor for the grieving process. It's a metaphor for Suzume shutting the door on her mother's death caused by a natural disaster so that she can move on, and also asking the nation of Japan to shut the door on these past disasters, so that the nation, having fully processed the situation and grieved accordingly, can move on from it. And I mean this sincerely, think this is super cool. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like I picked up on all this while watching the movie. Like I said, I didn't even know what 311 was going into it. Good luck getting my bagel brain with a hole in the middle to pick up on the subtle, metaphor-driven commentary hyper-specific to a nation's struggles. You know, a nation I don't live in and only happen to consume a lot of content from. But reading the interviews and learning what 311 was has gotten me to appreciate the movie's messaging on a new level. And I'm sure this meant a lot to a lot of people, and I won't try taking that away from those who resonated with the movie on this level. That being said, imagine how much better it would be if Suzume was properly shown having not fully processed her mother's death. I know I keep harping on this, but really, after reading the interviews, I'm convinced this movie was like a hair away from being a goddamn masterpiece. If Shinkai is asking the Japanese audience to process and overcome their nation's tragedies, imagine how powerful it would be if Suzume was right there with them. If Shinkai is asking international audiences to buy into its more general message of grief, well, same thing. The door metaphor is a wonderful idea, but the follow-through just isn't there. But maybe you have ascended taste in anime that a mere mortal like myself can't wrap my head around. Maybe this closing doors metaphor was all you needed to get into Suzume's head and connect with her arc. Maybe you even appreciate that it's told metaphorically, and that the movie didn't beat you over the head with the point that Suzume has trauma. Maybe you don't care about the movie's themes at all and just wanted a fun romance story, and having received such, you have no complaints about the film. And you know what? That's valid. All of these takes are valid, but I hope I've convinced you that my take is also valid. But surprisingly, we're not done talking about themes yet. Like I said, this movie feels kind of pointless, and that's due to a general void of compellingly told themes. We've already discussed how the film botches grief, but are there any other attempted themes that threaten to fill this void where a point should be? One part of the film is that Suzume and her aunt Tamaki have a strained relationship. Caring for Suzume took up the best years of Tamaki's life, and Suzume feels guilty for this. Their relationship is was not explored in all that much depth in the film, and I do have at least one fairly pressing issue with how it was conveyed. But you know what? It works fine as a plot point, and I appreciate that it gives Suzume's character more depth. So, is one of Suzume's themes about how to navigate a strained family dynamic? Yes, but actually no. While Tamaki and Suzume do fix the relationship real good by the end of the film, this is never presented as a main theme or message. It's a side story, yet another plot point in a movie crammed full of plot points. It's not explored in nearly enough depth to fill the void I was feeling. But the thing is, in theory, this isn't really an issue. Suzume and Tamaki aren't in the best of circumstances, and these circumstances were thrust upon them due to the death of Suzume's mother. So, as part of moving on from the death of her mother, Suzume and Tamaki also reconcile their relationship. You know, accept what happened, which in turn allows them to accept the present. Would you believe me if I said the fact that Suzume isn't shown to noticeably still be traumatized by her mother's death negatively affects the impact this plot point could have? In theory, this subplot is supposed to contribute to the main theme of grief in its own small way. But because the main theme is improperly conveyed, well, this subplot loses some of its potency, and on its own isn't capable of carrying the theme. Yet another thing that could possibly have filled this void is the idea of selfish love. So, like I said earlier, people shut doors to stop the worm apocalypse. But even more importantly, people also give up their lives to become keystones to also stop the worm apocalypse. It makes sense when you watch it, trust me. At the beginning of the film, Suzume accidentally frees Daijin from his keystone prison. Daijin then turns Souta into a chair who can poke-evolve into a keystone. I reiterate, it makes sense when you watch it. All that's important is that once we reach the point where Souta turns into a keystone, he's effectively dead. Suzume then needs to retrieve Souta from the afterlife, while also convincing Daijin to give up his life once again so that Souta can live. There's no logical reason why it's better for Souta to live than Daijin. Daijin doesn't particularly deserve death, and the movie never makes such a case. The only reason why Suzume wants Souta to live is because she's in love with him. Thus, their quest to turn Daijin back into a keystone is a selfish one. They want to live at the expense of Daijin. It's a legitimately fascinating theme, one directly carried over from Weathering with You. The issue is that Weathering with You pulled off this theme better by a factor of 10 quintillion. What I kept on anticipating while watching the movie was that we'd get to see Daijin's epic tragic backstory of laying down his life in order to become a keystone for the greater good. We'd get the briefest of glimpses into his daily life, before eventually we get the shot of him teary-faced, and he does a speech about how he hopes his sacrifice will mean something, and then he becomes the keystone. That's what I expected, but nothing even remotely like this happens. The movie never shows in plain terms exactly how much life means to Daijin, and exactly how much pain Suzume and Souta are causing him by asking him to become a keystone again. If the movie really wanted to hammer home the idea of selfish love as a main takeaway the audience would have from it, I feel like it should have fixated on how selfish the characters are being in a way that forces the audience to emotionally grapple with the ramifications of the main character's actions. That's what Weathering with You did in literally my favorite sequence of any Shinkai movie ever. While the audience cognitively understands that it's selfish, because the movie leaves it up in the air how much life means to Daijin, and how much pain sacrificing himself again will put him through, it once again fails to resonate with me strongly enough to feel like I can take it away as the point of the film. The only theme in this movie that's present enough that I'd consider it one of the main themes of this film, and that's also executed well, is that of a romance which is threatened to be destroyed. You know, that thing that every Shinkai film is about, more or less. And even then, despite being a less solid film overall due to its nonsensical plot, Your Name was a far better exploration of this theme for the merit of it being the only theme Your Name ever tried to tackle. But Suzume, in poorly tackling these other attempted themes in such a way that they never properly coalesce into a cohesive whole, confuses the audience on what the point of the movie even is, and fails to have the thematic poignancy of something like Weathering with You, or Garden of Words, or Your Name. It's like the movie is trying to be about damn near everything Shinkai has ever tried to tackle in a story before, but it never quite comes together to deliver any particularly powerful message, and because of that, the film feels aimless. So, that's Suzume. It gave me 2 hours of solid entertainment, and I don't regret seeing it, and I'll probably rewatch it someday on Blu-ray and have a grand old time doing so, and I still maintain that you all should go watch it. But it seems we'll have to wait a while longer for another Weathering with You. And you know what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Shinkai, you ungodly bizarre director. I rag on your movies a lot, but we'd all be less happy if Shinkai movies didn't have such a specific personality to them, even if the sacrifice for that personality is a bit of clumsiness here and there. Yo. If you enjoyed this video, do all those things YouTubers usually tell you to do. But even more importantly, go follow @Metarama_art on Twitter. He did the thumbnail for this video and it looks amazing. I have his page linked down below. He does a lot of Monogatari fan art. Also, watch our discussion of Suzume on Castaway Anime if you want to see me and Neon talk about this movie more holistically. And now, patrons. Behold, Alvilan, CJ, DUD, Dorian Newland, Dr. Awu, Hekacool, Ijo Saigai, Izzy, Jackson Keith, Jose Ramirez, Karen Chan, Minibomb456, Neon Manta, Nix Alexandra, Zika Man of Doom 007, Bidoofus, Hacking Pancakes, Liminalism, Loganos, Mike Saman, Rice Shower, and Timer. Thank you all for helping make these videos possible. And with that, are trains just a Shinkai reference?